Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Anita reveals to Nicole that she has officially cut off the funding for Leslie's trust. It's a quiet revelation that ripples through the cold marble halls of the Dupree estate like the crack of thunder before a storm. Nicole doesn't say anything at first. Her fingers tighten around the edge of her coffee cup, her eyes dart to the window, where beyond the manicured garden walls lies the gated community that's supposed to keep the chaos out. But chaos has a way of finding the cracks, and Leslie, with her newfound wealth and her old, festering grudges, has become the embodiment of it. Just a month earlier, Leslie's life had changed overnight. A dusty envelope from her lawyer's office confirmed what she had been chasing for years: that she was, legally and biologically, the daughter of Barbara Dupree. That single sheet of paper didn't just grant her a name, it unlocked the vault. Suddenly, the money started flowing from Barbara's trust, as if some long-forgotten promise had finally come due. Leslie didn't waste a second. She made sure the Duprees felt the tremor of her comeback. Every dollar she spent was a statement. Every gesture was laced with vengeance. At first, the Duprees tried to ignore her. Vernon Dupree, with his old-world composure and taste for vintage cigars, told Anita not to give Leslie the satisfaction of attention. But Anita couldn't help herself. There was something about Leslie's audacity. The way she wore her new wealth-like armored hat made Anita seethe. For decades, Anita had worked to preserve the Dupree name, to maintain a certain kind of order that came from money managed properly and secrets buried deeply. Leslie, with her careless smirk and designer clothes, was undoing all of it with frightening speed. Leslie's first act of defiance was to buy her way into the same country club where the Duprees had ruled for generations. Membership wasn't supposed to be for sale, but Leslie's checkbook had a way of convincing even the most stubborn of gatekeepers. She didn't just join, she flaunted it. She arrived at luncheons in a brand new convertible, flashing diamonds that gleamed brighter than the disapproving stares. And when she purchased a house inside the gates directly across from the Dupree estates, did it with the kind of satisfaction only someone who'd been underestimated her entire life could understand. The whispers began immediately. In the tennis courts, by the pool, in the quiet corners of the clubhouse. People smiled at Leslie's attempts to fit in, but their eyes gave her away. "Money can buy a house," one woman murmured, "but it can't buy heritage." Others were harsher: "You can't polish what was never meant to shine." Leslie pretended not to hear. She threw bigger parties. She donated to every local charity. She played the game the way she thought the Duprees did: lavishly, publicly, relentlessly. But the more she tried to buy her way into their world, the more that world turned its back on her. Anita watched it all unfold from her terrace. She had the perfect view of Leslie's renovations: the noise, the dust, the parade of contractors coming and going. It was chaos disguised as progress, and Anita found a grim kind of comfort in it. "She's building her own downfall," Anita told Nicole one morning. "Brick by brick." Nicole tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. She knew her mother's confidence was a mask. Leslie had already proven she could destabilize the family in ways no outsider ever could. Because Leslie wasn't just some scorned social climber. She was family. And her connection to Ted, Nicole's husband, was the kind of revelation that could burn everything down. Nicole still didn't know the full truth that Leslie had a child with Ted. The scandal had been carefully contained, a secret buried under layers of legal maneuvering and hush money. Ted had thought it would never surface again. But secrets have a strange way of crawling back when the people keeping them start to lose control. When Leslie moved into her new house, she brought more than furniture. She brought memories. Her walls weren't just painted, they were lined with reminders of what she thought she deserved. The trust fund money became her weapon. She used it to strike at every soft spot the Duprees had, every insecurity they hid. She funded gossip. She bought friends. She even hired private investigators to dig up dirt, determined to prove that Barbara had wronged her beyond inheritance. Anita and Vernon tried everything to stop the money from flowing. They hired lawyers, accountants, even old family contacts who owed them favors. At one point, Anita contacted her former son-in-law, the same man she swore she'd never speak to again, to see if there was any legal loophole to freeze the trust. But Leslie had already secured her claim. Her identity as Barbara's daughter made her legally untouchable. The money was hers, and Anita hated the helplessness that came with that truth. One late afternoon, as the sun burned orange across the gated community, Anita made her decision. If she couldn't stop Leslie's money directly, she would starve the source. She withdrew her own contributions to the Dupree family trust, effectively cutting off future distributions. Leslie wouldn't notice right away. The accounts were complex, the payments staggered, but Anita knew it was only a matter of time before Leslie realized the faucet had run dry. When Anita told Nicole what she'd done, it wasn't with triumph, but with resignation. "She'll burn through it," Anita said, her tone both sharp and weary. "People like her always do." Nicole wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe her mother's logic, the idea that recklessness eventually collapses under its own weight. But something deep inside her whispered that Leslie wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Across the street, Leslie was too busy orchestrating her next move to notice that her fortune was already on borrowed time. The renovations on her new house had become a full-blown spectacle. Trucks lined the streets. Workers shouted through clouds of dust. The constant drilling and hammering were driving the neighborhood into chaos. The country club wives complained. Even Vernon filed a noise complaint, something he swore he'd never do. Leslie didn't care. "Let them hear me," she said. "Let them know I'm not going anywhere." But behind her bravado was panic. Her contractor, a smooth-talking man with promises of European craftsmanship, had started missing deadlines. Materials went missing. The costs kept rising. When Leslie demanded answers, she was met with excuses and invoices. Slowly, she began to realize she'd been conned. The marble that was supposed to come from Italy was a cheap imitation. The custom windows were defective. The money she'd been so eager to flaunt was evaporating faster than she could control. Anita found out through a friend at the club. "She hired a crook," the friend whispered over brunch. "Apparently, he's done this before, takes the deposit, disappears, and leaves a mess behind." Anita smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't kind, but it was real. Meanwhile, Leslie's daughter Eva was quietly watching everything unravel. Eva had grown up in the shadow of her mother's bitterness. Leslie had filled her head with stories of betrayal and injustice, painting the Duprees as villains who had stolen everything that should have been theirs. But now, seeing the Duprees up close, Eva started questioning that narrative. She saw how Anita treated her staff, how Vernon respected even those beneath him, how Nicole tried to maintain grace under the crushing weight of scandal. It didn't match the monsters her mother had described. Eva had met Ted a few times too many, really, and something in him reminded her of who her mother used to be before resentment consumed her. Ted wasn't cruel. He was broken. The kind of man who made mistakes because he didn't know how to face the truth. Eva could see that. And she could also see that his heart still belonged to Nicole. That realization hurt her in ways she didn't expect. Because deep down, she wanted to believe her mother's version of the story, that Ted was the villain, that Nicole was a thief who stole happiness that never belonged to her. But reality was far messier. The night Eva overheard her mother arguing with the contractor, she felt the first flicker of pity. Leslie's voice cracked, desperate, humiliated. For the first time, Eva saw her not as a schemer but as a woman undone by her own ambition. It made her both furious and sad. That night, she sent a message to Ted, short and simple: "You need to fix what she broke." Ted didn't respond, but he read it. And that was enough. Leslie, oblivious to her daughter's shifting loyalty, kept spiraling. The half-renovated house became a metaphor for her life grand plans, rotten foundations. Her designer furniture sat in unopened boxes, her bank account hemorrhaging from lawsuits and unpaid bills. Yet, she refused to admit defeat. She threw another party, a desperate attempt to prove she was still in control. The champagne flowed, the music blared, but everyone could sense that in her laughter, the way her eyes darted toward Anita's house across the street. Anita didn't attend, of course. She preferred to watch from a distance, her expression unreadable as the party lights flickered against the dark sky. Nicole sat beside her, quiet, the weight of everything pressing down. "It's only a matter of time," Anita murmured. People like her always find their own destruction. Nicole didn't answer. She wasn't so sure anymore. Leslie had already destroyed enough to prove she wasn't just another fallen socialite. She was dangerous. And somewhere, across the gate, Leslie raised her glass to the night, whispering to herself, "They'll see me, even if it kills me." The tension in the gated world of Dupree and Leslie was reaching its breaking point. Money had been the weapon, pride the battlefield, and the truth, one thing no one could afford to face, was still waiting just beyond the gates. The weeks that followed were suffocating inside the gates. The Dupree estate, usually calm and meticulously composed, felt like a fortress under siege. Every morning, Anita stood by her window with a glass of water in hand, watching the slow decay of Leslie's construction project across the street. The noise had finally stopped, but the silence that replaced it was even worse. The half-finished mansion stood like a scar in the neighborhood, a monument to arrogance and poor judgment. Nicole had begun avoiding the country club altogether. She couldn't stand the whispers anymore, the veiled sympathy that sounded more like amusement. Every conversation seemed to circle back to Leslie's downfall, but Nicole didn't feel victorious. The entire situation felt poisonous, as if every brick Leslie had laid across the street carried a curse that seeped into their own home. Ted had moved out months earlier, supposedly for space, but his absence echoed through every hallway. What Nicole didn't know, what no one except Eva truly understood, was that Leslie wasn't finished. The con from the contractor had cost her a fortune, yes, but it also ignited something far darker in her. She started showing up unannounced at local business meetings, using the remnants of her money to invest in small ventures, determined to rebuild her image and prove she could thrive without Dupree charity. But reputation isn't something you can buy back once it's lost. People smiled to her face, took her checks, then whispered the same old things as soon as she turned her back. Eva watched it all with a growing sense of dread. Her mother's obsession was consuming her, and the more she tried to reason with Leslie, the more distant Leslie became. The house was filled with unopened boxes and unpaid bills, and yet Leslie talked as if a grand plan was unfolding, a plan to expose the Duprees once and for all. Eva knew that look in her mother's eyes. It was the same one she'd seen years ago, when Leslie lost her first lawsuit against the family. Desperation masquerading as purpose. Anita, meanwhile, began to notice cracks in her own fortress. Vernon had grown unusually quiet, withdrawn into his study. When she asked what was wrong, he simply said, "You can only hold a family together for so long before it starts holding you back." His words haunted her. For years, Anita had operated under the belief that control equaled safety. She managed the money, the image, even the emotions of everyone around her. But now, with Nicole's marriage in shambles and the trust in chaos, control felt like a cage of her own making. One afternoon, as autumn crept over the lawns, Eva appeared at Anita's door. She looked fragile, not like the confident girl Leslie had raised to be her weapon, but like someone who had finally seen the truth and couldn't unsee it. Anita's instinct was to shut the door, to protect herself from whatever drama Leslie had unleashed this time. But something in Eva's trembling voice stopped her. "I don't want anything," Eva said. "I just need to talk." They sat in the conservatory, the afternoon light slanting through the glass. Eva told Anita everything about Leslie's plans, about the financial ruin, about the lengths her mother might go to in order to reclaim power. Anita listened, unmoving, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But when Eva mentioned Ted, when she confessed that Leslie still believed she could win him back, Anita's composure cracked for the first time. "That man has already done enough damage," she said sharply. "He won't be part of this family again." But Eva shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered. "He is still part of it. You just don't see how deep it goes." Those words lingered long after Eva left. That night, Anita called Nicole into her study. "I need you to be honest with me," she said. "Has Ted been in contact with Leslie?" Nicole looked startled, then tired. "I don't know," she admitted. "He doesn't talk about her. He doesn't talk about much of anything." In truth, Ted had spoken to Leslie once. It was a brief, bitter phone call after the contractor scandal broke. Leslie had accused him of betrayal, of siding with the Duprees. Ted's silence on the other end had only enraged her further. When she hung up, She swore she would make them all pay. But Ted wasn't her target anymore. Her sights were set higher. Leslie began preparing a new move, something more calculated than her earlier chaos. She hired a private investigator again, this time, not to dig into the Dupree's past, but to expose the ways Anita had manipulated the trust. There were whispers that Anita had used family money to fund her own ventures, that she had redirected funds to prevent Leslie's access. Some of it was true. Anita had bent the rules, believing it was justified to protect the family name. If Leslie managed to prove it, everything would unravel. Meanwhile, Eva found herself trapped between loyalty and conscience. She had started spending more time with Nicole, quietly helping her with charity events, offering small gestures of support. The bond between them grew in the unspoken understanding of shared pain, one woman trying to hold her life together, another trying to escape her mother's shadow. Nicole saw in Eva a kind of innocence Leslie had tried to destroy, and Eva saw in Nicole the stability she'd always longed for. When Leslie discovered Eva's visits to the Dupree house, her fury was volcanic. "You think they love her except you?" she screamed. "You're my daughter, not theirs." But Eva didn't flinch. "I'm not yours when being yours means hating everyone else." That night, Leslie threw a glass at the wall, the shards scattering across the floor like broken pieces of the life she'd tried to build. Anita, realizing Leslie's state of mind was deteriorating, decided to confront her directly. It wasn't a move of compassion but of necessity. She arranged the meeting through a mutual acquaintance, a club member who still tolerated Leslie enough to broker contact. When the two women finally sat across from each other in a dimly lit cafe just outside the gates, the air was thick with decades of unspoken resentment. Leslie looked exhausted but defiant. "You think cutting off my trust will stop me?" she asked. "You think you can just erase me?" Anita's response was cold and deliberate. "You erased yourself the moment you turned this into a circus. Money can't make you one of us, Leslie. You could have built something respectable. Instead, you built ruins." For a brief moment, Leslie's composure faltered. The truth of it hit her, but pride wouldn't let her admit it. "You'll regret underestimating me," she said, standing to leave. Anita didn't answer. She didn't have to. Both women knew that whatever came next would not end peacefully. As winter descended, the Dupree neighborhood grew quieter. Leslie's mansion remained unfinished, the symbol of her failure looming larger than ever. Yet inside that empty house, Leslie was scheming again. The investigator she hired had found something, a paper trail connecting Anita's name to an unauthorized withdrawal from the trust years earlier. It wasn't damning on its own, but it was enough to spark a scandal. Leslie planned to leak it anonymously to the local press, timing it to coincide with the Dupree Foundation's annual charity gala. Eva found out accidentally when she overheard her mother talking on the phone. The thought of another public humiliation made her stomach twist. That night, she went to Nicole's house again. She didn't ask permission. She simply arrived, pale and trembling. "She's going to destroy you?" Eva said. "All of you." "She has proof." Nicole didn't panic. Instead, she called Anita, who listened in silence as Eva explained everything. When she finished, Anita's expression hardened into something that looked almost like calm acceptance. "Then we end this," Anita said. On the night of the gala, the Dupree estate glittered as if nothing was wrong. Guests arrived in black tie elegance, the orchestra played, and champagne flowed freely. But beneath the glamour, everyone sensed tension. Vernon avoided the photographers. Nicole smiled too much. And Anita, regal as ever, moved through the crowd like a general preparing for war. Leslie showed up uninvited. She wore a dress that shimmered under the chandeliers, her entrance deliberate, theatrical. Conversations halted. Even the music seemed to hesitate. She walked straight to Anita, her smile sharp as glass. "Beautiful evening," she said softly. "A shame it won't last." Anita didn't blink. "If you're here to embarrass yourself, at least have the decency to do it quietly." Leslie's eyes flicked toward the reporters in the corner. "Oh, I won't need to say a word. By morning, everyone will know what you've done." But before she could continue, Eva appeared behind her. "No, they won't," she said, voice trembling but steady. "Because I destroyed it." The words hung in the air. Leslie turned, stunned. "You what?" "I deleted everything," Eva continued. "The files, The email's all of it. I won't let you ruin more lives because you can't face your own. For a moment, time stopped. Then Leslie's hand shot out, striking Eva across the face. The sound echoed through the room, gasps rippled through the crowd. Nicole rushed forward, pulling Eva away. Anita stood frozen, her eyes locked on Leslie, not with hatred this time, but something colder, almost pity. Security escorted Leslie out, her protests fading into the night. Outside, under the glow of the estate's lights, she stood alone. The reporters, sensing blood, followed her, shouting questions she didn't answer. The next morning, her photo was everywhere, disheveled, furious, undone. The scandal she tried to unleash had backfired completely. Instead of exposing the Duprees, it cemented her as the villain she'd tried so hard not to be. Her finances collapsed soon after. The unfinished mansion was seized, her accounts drained by lawsuits and debts. By the end of the year, she was gone from the gates, the iron doors closing behind her for good. Eva stayed behind. Anita offered her a small guest house on the property, just until you find your footing, she said. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Nicole helped her enroll in school again, and for the first time in years, Eva felt the quiet comfort of a home that didn't feel like a battlefield. Anita often watched her from the veranda, wondering how a story that began with revenge had somehow led to redemption. Perhaps, she thought, the gates had never been about keeping others out but about keeping their own darkness in. Inside those gates, life moved on. But every now and then, when the wind carried the faint echo of laughter from the old house across the street, Anita would pause, glass in hand, and wonder whether Leslie was truly gone or simply waiting for the next opening in the walls they had all built so high.